Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of Signal with Snorlax. We try to find some signal in these very these very chaotic markets. Inspired to make this video after seeing one Hyperliquid listed on Robinhood, and then of course CZ getting pardoned. Both of these two things kind of pertaining to some of the biggest exchanges in our space. I just wanted to talk about the exchange wars because where is liquidity going to head to next? And we can always kind of pinpoint a handful of altcoin market leaders, right? One, where could liquidity move to next? But also, secondly, which exchange is ultimately going to be the biggest beneficiary of kind of this back and forth game that we see played for retail and probably institutional liquidity as well? It's really amazing how quickly sentiment can shift, I think, when we talk about like individuals within crypto, because within this uptrend, CZ was viewed as, he's the best, he is the best crime kingpin in all of crypto. He's pumping my bags. We love CZ. Market completely gets wiped. Altcoins almost go to literal zero, largely because of Binance's risk controls. However, you really want to pinpoint the blame. It's pretty clear that Binance was largely responsible for what did happen about 2 weeks ago. We've recovered all the way back to the highs. We've since been bleeding down. But now we've got news that CZ has been pardoned, right? So are we going to see CZ potentially? I think there are a few implications here, right? I mean, is CZ going to once again, I mean, he always has been, maybe more in the shadows, but are we going to see him kind of re-enter the limelight, reclaim that main character mantle for all of crypto, and maybe get a little bit more ambitious as far as pumping altcoins, especially, I think would probably be the large beneficiary of this, right? As far as the BNB chart, I mean, you can only really view it within the context of, all right, it's in an uptrend. It often trades very ugly, but I do think it's kind of trading very in line with large cap stocks like the Mag 7, maybe even some bank stocks. And I think you kind of have to respect the uptrend on this asset as long as this low is holding. Right? This almost like this line in the sand between, all right, well, looked like BNB was potentially going to retrace its entire recovery to now we have a pivot based around CZ's pardon. So for me, that's kind of how I'm viewing Binance. It's in an uptrend. And maybe we're about to see Binance open itself up to American liquidity as well. And I think if that is going to be the case, that has huge implications. I mean, pretty much throughout all of crypto, right? I mean, we're talking about retail traders who haven't had access to Binance for the last few years, potentially wanting to trade there, as well as institutional liquidity as well, which is maybe, obviously we've had Coinbase, we've had Robinhood that have given you the option to trade crypto. But I think as far from an institutional standpoint, we have Coinbase, Kraken, Binance is maybe a little bit more of a crypto native exchange, right? So, and also the fees are better than they are on a place like Coinbase. So I would say on face value, I think that Binance kind of having this, we'll call it a comeback right now, right? We'll call it a comeback unless unless this pump gets fully retraced, which right now it doesn't really look like that's going to be the case. I feel like Coinbase is probably the most threatened ultimately by this from like a market share standpoint. We'll see how more of these developments kind of shake out, but a lot of people have been making a lot to do about Binance versus Hyperliquid, when I almost wonder if now Binance is going to kind of be more so an issue for Coinbase going forward, whereas I think Hyperliquid has a very clear PMF for decentralized finance and decentralized exchanges. I think the chart obviously right now looks a lot worse than Binance. A few months ago, I did a video talking about how I thought Hyperliquid could inevitably play out. And I think that this chart, this coin, probably needs time before we know exactly what it's going to do from here. For one, I mean, this does it looks a little bit complacent, we'll call it. But I think at the same time, if you're kind of breaking out above these highs at like 42.8, because when we look at Bitcoin, and I won't be talking about majors too much on today's show, but I do think from like a market structure standpoint, when we look at these highs on BTC, if these are reclaimed, you're talking about altcoins also reclaiming market structure. And I'm not in the camp that we're going to see a shoulder form here. I think it's much more likely if you are reclaiming these highs on majors that we're probably about to enter a pretty aggressive uptrend within crypto. So, with that said, if Hyperliquid's breaking out above these highs, I have to imagine that's a very positive sign for the entire crypto market. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. Not just in the long term, because I'm obviously very bullish on Hyperliquid. I actually think from an ROI standpoint, Hyperliquid will likely outperform Binance over a multi-year time horizon. That's largely based around market capitalization more than any fundamental reason that you could give me. I think, I think if we're talking about short-term outperformance, Hyperliquid's kind of an obvious one to me because we're getting close to around the time of the year where they did the airdrop last year, right? It was right on Thanksgiving evening. And I would not be surprised if history ended up repeating itself and we saw Hyperliquid airdrop yet again. And if that's going to be the case, I kind of feel like you're going to see speculation on Hype Exchange ramp up here over the next few weeks as people try to squeeze out, every last little bit of juice from the airdrop or potential airdrop. We have to preface it by saying that. That they can't, right? So I think Hyperliquid, short and long term, is going to consistently have staying power. Like I said, a lot has been made about almost like this rivalry between Binance and Hyperliquid. It's kind of hard to call it a rivalry because Binance does do so much more volume than Hyperliquid still. But Binance has largely been trying to squash the new kid on the block, which is Hyperliquid. So clearly they do view them as a threat. I think they should view them as a threat. But like I said, I think what's going to end up likely happening is Binance will steal market share from Coinbase more so than Hyperliquid, given some of the developments that we are seeing regarding Trump pardoning CZ. And man, how does that taste in your mouth after a lot of crypto retail got completely wiped out, largely because of Binance shenanigans? Some additional exchanges, because we should definitely talk about them, right? I don't want to spend the entire episode talking about Binance and Hyperliquid. Mantle is obviously Bybit's version of BNB. If Binance is getting pardoned and they're potentially, and this is dubious speculation on my end, right? Binance potentially opening the door up to American retail and American institutional liquidity. Does that mean that Bybit eventually gets that too? Or is Bybit kind of going to remain like this offshore non-KYC bucket shop that Binance was always kind of like a step above? And I think, I don't know, truthfully, where Bybit's going to fall in this whole equation. But what I do know is that if BNB continues to move higher, it's pretty likely that Mantle, Bybit's unofficial version of BNB, probably does too, right? And in hindsight, wouldn't it be very clean retests of previous all-time high if that's the case? And I think as well, this kind of plays back into the idea of all right, BNB should hold these lows because we're looking at other exchanges. This is pretty clearly a very important level for I would say broader exchange liquidity. So for that reason, we can continue to keep an eye on Mantle and BNB, but they're probably going to trade, I would imagine, mostly correlated from here. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Aster, right? Kind of Binance's or BSC's, we'll call it their version of Hyperliquid, right? This kind of spawned in as Binance was really trying to steal market share from Hyperliquid, steal their liquidity. Maybe they're not as bullish on pumping Aster token, but clearly they wanted to hurt Hyperliquid. I guess with this token, we'll see. It kind of goes back to what I just said. Were they trying to pump Aster to create a new real DEX product, or are they just trying to hurt Hyperliquid? And I think if it's the former, that is a much more bullish catalyst for Aster ultimately than the latter, right? Because if it's the latter, then we could look back and this exchange just ends up bleeding out forever. But What I do know is that a lot of DeFi products are kind of looking like this, where since 1010, they gave a really nice pop. They've kind of been bleeding out. So I'd like to see some market structure breaks on this asset, really kind of reclaiming these highs in order to get really bullish again on this asset. It probably looks something like that. But as far as like native crypto protocols and exchanges go, that's what I see. We can kind of talk about these TradFi exchanges too, because obviously they're very important. Robinhood has, I mean, who knows how high this is going, quite frankly. Would I bid a chart that looks like this? Probably not personally, but clearly you see this PMF for retail speculation. And 0DTEs, the AI bubble, the small cap bubble that we've been in for the last few months, Robinhood has obviously benefited. They benefited even before that, right? Basically since it began an uptrend in 2024. At this point, what is it up like 20x off the low? So clearly there is a demand for these assets that represent the growth of these exchanges. I'm very bullish on Robinhood as a product. As an asset, it's a little difficult for me to tell you that a chart that's in parabola, like, all right, what's next? But clearly we can see the PMF from, I think, that retail liquidity aspect. These crypto tokens that represent the same thing have a reason to be owned, right? Because we're seeing larger swaths of liquidity already bid up the TradFi equivalent. I mean, we can talk about Coinbase too to kind of finish things up. Is Coinbase going to be most affected by Binance potentially jumping back into the American markets? I will say on face value, this looks much weaker than BNB and much weaker than Robinhood. I guess you could argue that it's building up, stacking structure before a potential parabola, but truthfully, I think the only way that this chart would maybe go parabolic is, and I don't even know what it would mean for the Coinbase stock. We might have to be charting something completely different for Coin soon if they launch a base token. And really, I think that would be big for Coinbase, largely because you've just seen retail get completely wiped out on chain over the last 6 months, as well as on perps, especially over the last few weeks. So on-chain markets need a liquidity generation event at this point. Is that base launching a token? Will base launch a token? I guess these are questions we have to ask, as well as what does this eventually mean for the Coinbase stock, which to me looks definitely weaker than some of these other options that you can potentially bid from an exchange standpoint. But Coinbase it's a mainstay when we talk about American exchanges, especially for institutional liquidity. So we can't completely write Coinbase off, but I would have to say at this point, I'd probably rather own some of the more native crypto exchanges, right? And we will see how that all shakes out. But if you ask me to pick a winner, I think that will be a very difficult task. How do you even define the winner? Is it ultimately just the highest market capitalization, the highest volume, or is it going to be, I guess it depends on your situation. Is it going to be ultimately the coin that does the most number of multiples to the upside from here over the next 5 to 10 years? For me personally, decentralized finance and decentralized trading has always been kind of at the forefront of what I've been looking for from an exchange. So I would tell you right now, even if Binance does open its doors for American liquidity, I'll still probably be trading on Hyperliquid. And I think the token from an ROI standpoint probably has more in it than BNB. If they start to really pump something like Mantle or Aster, I could see that being kind of like the sleeper pick from an ROI standpoint on doing the most multiples. But really, I just think it's very interesting that we have all of these great exchange products, and now we are potentially opening the door for more traders to be able to use them. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm keeping my eye on right now, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video today, just kind of talking about exchanges and crypto. It's been kind of a war because liquidity has dried up, I think, in crypto over the last year, but it does look like we're getting close to being able to come out of the forest and really focus less on fighting over that liquidity and more on kind of a rising tide lifts all ships. But That's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. And until then, thanks again for tuning in. And as always, stay safe.